All right, it is 12:01, so we'll get started. Hi, everybody. I'm Sarah, and I'm on the marketing team here at Northland. And I wanted to welcome you to today's webinar. This afternoon, we'll be discussing our investment with Arista Networks and how that investment helps give our customers a stable and reliable network. A few things I just want to go over quick before we get started. At the bottom of your screen, you can see a Q&A box. So if at any point in time you do have a question, you can just throw it in there and we will get those answered for you guys. This afternoon, we have Rob from Arista and Mike Cooper from Northland with us. Rob joined Arista in 2016 as their senior account director for upstate New York. Previously, he spent 12 years at Cisco Systems, where he managed one of Cisco's top 10 global clients. And Mike has been with Northland for 16 years and manages and develops our network and system infrastructure to ensure reliable and efficient services. So today, like I mentioned before, Rob and Mike are going to talk to you guys all about the fundamental mission of Arista and its advantages to Northland and our customers. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Rob.
All right. Thank you, Sarah, for that wonderful introduction. And we appreciate the opportunity to tell your client list here and your panel attendees a little bit more about Arista Networks. And Mike Cooper, it's great working with you, and thanks for joining us. I'm going to share my screen. All right. Can everybody see that screen? Sarah, are we good there? Terrific. So again, I am the Senior Account Director for Arista for Upstate New York. We've had the privilege of working with many huge names in Upstate, some of which we'll show you in a minute. But really a great pleasure working with Northland and understanding how they've been able to transition from a traditional legacy network to the Arista fabric. And so we're going to talk a little bit about Arista, who we are. I know some of you may not know very much about us. We don't do a lot of marketing. We are sort of a word of mouth growth company. So this is just a bit about who we are and where we're positioned in the market. We're at about $2.6 billion in revenue, about a $28 billion market capitalization. We're on the S&P 500. So, you know, those three bullets alone just to kind of speak to the fact that we are not a niche company. We are a large company now taking over the networking space. Many people don't know this, but we are the #1 networking supplier in speeds above 10 gigabits. So we have switches now that go from 1 gig to 10 gig to 25 gig, 40 gig, 50 gig, 100 gig. We have 400 gig switches now in production at many of our customers, and we have 800 gig switches coming out next year. We are a recognized leader by 2 of the top industry analysts, Forrester and Gartner. I'll show you their charts in a moment. And you know, we are not an acquisition target. We are an acquirer. In the past 3 years, we've made some very key technology acquisitions that just, you know, fill in our product portfolio very nicely. So we have an end-to-end cognitive network solution set that includes great security, data monitoring, and performance switches. So this is the Forrester Wave. They've rated us several years in a row now at the very top of their leader wave. You can see the legacy providers in this chart as well. So great testament from Forrester. With Gartner, this is the 6th year in a row that they've rated us in the coveted upper right quadrant of their Magic Quadrant, on a parallel with Cisco from ability to execute and outperforming them in terms of the completeness of our vision. And this is sort of the most telling thing, I think, in the industry, at least from my perspective, having done this for a few decades now. Arista has taken a lot of market share from Cisco. Cisco's dropped fairly precipitously in the last 10 years, about 30% market share. It's given up 20 of that to Arista. And compared to our competition, we've grown our market share faster and greater than all of our competitors combined. So there's been a clear market transition in the networking space from, you know, the legacy leader to sort of a more modern cloud scale, cloud developed networking provider. And speaking of cloud, you know, we're very proud that Arista has seated itself in just about every industry and some of the biggest names in those industries. But what really gave Arista Launchpad was taking over the cloud titan space. So 6 of the largest data centers in the world are running their fabrics on Arista. So you see the list here: Facebook, Microsoft, Google, Apple. You know, it's interesting to know that if you have not heard of us, you've been probably a user, because when you go home tonight to finish your Netflix series, you're riding on an Arista network, and you jump on your treadmill or go out for a walk and you're on your, listening to your Spotify playlist, you're on an Arista network. Microsoft Azure, which many people have started to put some workloads in the cloud. Microsoft Azure is based 100% on Arista switches. They have over 10,000 of our high performance switches in their network. And that's a testament that the cloud providers trust Arista really for many reasons, but the primary reason is that it just works. The operating system is very stable. We have very, very few bugs. We have very few vulnerabilities. And so they like, obviously, in the cloud, very stable networks. Here in upstate New York, again, a very coveted client list over the last several years that we've been working with these companies. This is not a comprehensive list, but these are some of the largest names, I think, that you'd recognize that have made significant investment in Arista, including New York State government, M&T Bank, Paychex, Wegmans, Excellus, Roswell, of course, Northland, some banks, universities, etc. Very, very good client list and doing well here in upstate New York. And we hope that you folks may consider joining us as well. This is, I think, one of the biggest reasons why people like Arista once they've implemented it. This is a chart of the common vulnerabilities and exposures by network operating system for the last 7 years. Now, these are vulnerabilities that are high priority. In other words, if you don't patch these, you are exposed to security threats or bugs that could trip up your network. And in the last 7 years, as you can see, across all of Cisco's operating systems, there's over 900 vulnerabilities. Juniper, over 300. With Arista, there's been 13 in the last 7 years. Very stable, secure operating system. And in the wireless space, well, actually, what this really means to our client list is that, if you were to try to make sure that you were not vulnerable to attack or not susceptible to bugs, in a Juniper environment, you'd be taking your network down every 8 days just to patch. In a Cisco environment, you'd be taking your network down every 1.5 days just to patch. With Arista, you don't need to make that choice of downtime versus security. You can have both. So with only, with so few vulnerabilities, you can patch once a year in our environment. So again, very stable, secure environment. The story is even better in our wireless products. You can see over the last 7 years, Arista Wi-Fi has had 0 vulnerabilities. Some of the market leaders have had several. Gartner has called Arista Wi-Fi the most secure Wi-Fi in the industry for the last 10 years running. So what makes us different? There are some foundational building blocks here that make Arista different. And I don't know the technical level of everybody that's attending, so I'll try to not geek out on you too much. But first of all, we do not fabricate our own networking chips. So we leverage the ASIC industry, Broadcom, Intel, Cavium, Barefoot, all these fabricators that are making fantastic, high performance, low latency, high speed, high density, low power consuming chips. They're out there and they're making great chips. If we did this ourselves, our R&D costs would go through the roof. We'd have to charge you more. We'd have to charge Northland more. Your network costs would go up. So we leverage the merchant silicon industry, and that allows us to take advantage of Moore's law. So as technology densities and speeds double every 18 months, we're riding that curve. If we made our own chips, we would want to keep those investments, preserved in the marketplace for 5 to 7 years before we made the next chip, because they're very expensive to do. So that's the advantage of leveraging the ASIC market. And then on top of that, we put a pure and unmodified Linux kernel. And what that means is this is a non-proprietary switch. It adheres completely to open standards. That gives Northland and subsequently you the flexibility of popping in any best of breed tool that needs to be added to the network without the risk of saying, hey, we didn't invent it here, therefore it's not compatible, it doesn't work. You can use a lot of off-the-shelf best of breed tools to secure the network and provide better tool sets. So running in the Linux user space is our operating system. And we architected this operating system to do things very, very differently than legacy operating systems. Typically, legacy operating systems, most of the operating systems that are run in the industry are susceptible to cross communication and message passing protocol failures. And that's because all of these little sub-processes that make up what we know as networking have to talk to each other. And if one of them fails, it has a cascading effect on the rest. We create a system database where all of the state information is contained in this database. So these sub-processes are not talking to each other. They're not susceptible then to the cascading failure. This gives us reliability and stability. And the great thing about this is that in this state database, every single change of every state of every process in your network switch is recorded here in real time. So if an LED light goes from on to off or off to on, that's recorded in the sysdb. If a fan speed changes, that's recorded in the sysdb. And the nice thing about that is our single management tool, single pane of glass management tool called CloudVision, these operating system state changes are constantly streamed in real time to CloudVision. So Mike Cooper, for example, running the Northland network, has a real-time motion picture of everything that's going on in his network. Makes it great for troubleshooting, which means Northland, if they run into any issues, can troubleshoot quicker than their competitors, can keep your network up and operational faster and better than any other tool in the marketplace because they've got that perfect visibility. They're not missing any changes in the network. And so lastly, what makes Arista special is that what I've just described to you, that operating system called EOS and our management tool called CloudVision, we provide software consistency across every single thing that you may be doing. So if you're running Arista in your data center as a spine, it's the exact same binary image of the operating system as if you're running it as a leaf. If you're running it as a storage leaf, or as a services leaf, or as a data center interconnect leaf. If you're running an Arista router, it's the exact same image of the operating system as it is in the data center. If you're running us in your branch as a power over Ethernet switch, an access switch, it's the same binary of the operating system. If you're running us in the public cloud, it's the same binary of the operating system. So we have this uniform, consistent software environment across all of your use cases, from data center to edge to cloud. And it's all managed by one tool, single pane of glass, that shows you the entire network and gives you automation capabilities. So auto provisioning, auto patching, auto upgrades, automatic replacements, right? All at a press of a button. So for example, one of our larger clients, ADP, is a payroll processor. Some of you may use ADP. A couple of years ago when they first brought their platform over to Arista, they had over 900 Arista switches in their network. And they needed to do a complete version upgrade of every switch in their network, of the operating system. And they did that in 3 weekends. So think about, I don't know the sizes and the scopes of some of your operations, but traditionally to upgrade 900 switches would take probably the better part of a year or sometimes 2 years. They were able to do that in 3 weekends because CloudVision was able to just push those updates out to every switch in their estate. And the only reason why it took them 3 weekends instead of 1 is because they just wanted to, for safety purposes, do 1/3 of the network at a time instead of doing it all at once. So those are just a couple of really quick sort of speed dating introductions to Arista, what makes us different and special. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mike Cooper to talk a little bit about his experience. And Mike, over to you if you have any thoughts or comments about your experience so far with Arista.
Yeah, I think it's you talked about the CloudVision there, and that was one of the talking points that I was going to talk about. Is we're coming from a Cisco network and we're coming into a Arista network, and one thing that's amazing is the software versions. They're all consistent and they're uniform. With the Cisco world, you were dealing with a version for this, a version of that. It had feature sets and different weird oddities to the Cisco software. And when you're working with Arista, right across the board, it pretty much talks about, they all use the same type of software. And when you use the CloudVision portal, you can just push the software updates through software. Another thing about the Cloud Vision portal that I found amazingly convenient to use is something called applets. In the Cisco world, when you're making changes, you had to search for configuration stuff and this there, and it made it very complicated and confusing. And the learning curve on Cisco software was very large. With Arista, if you want to work on one specific customer or one piece of the software or something, it allows you to pull that right out and put it off to the side, work on it, and put it right back in. And it keeps track of all the revisions and changes, like makes any changes and stuff like that. And it just makes things so much easier, and it has so much more tools and visibility than anything that I've ever used in the past. The Cloud Vision portal is pretty amazing, and it's absolutely a great tool to talk about and to use. And another thing that I want to talk about was when we went from a Cisco network going to the Arista world, was the ease of the command line command line system. A lot of people use GUIs and stuff like that, but if you're coming from a Cisco world, you're using a lot of stuff with a command line, putting commands here, doing a lot of work and paperwork ahead of time and running scripts and so on and so forth. And if you're familiar, I've been doing Cisco's for over 25 years now. I was able to jump into the Arista world in a matter of minutes. I was able to, understand the commands, understand the languages, understand how all that stuff worked. Whereas with Cisco, it's different. You worked on it for years and years and years and years, and you learned and you learned and you learned. And then when you come into the command line interface, Arista is so similar. There's things that are different, of course, but it's for the most part, it was pretty simple to use. Another thing I want to talk about is the service and support. We've been using Arista, for about a year and a half now, and working with them. And the service is amazing. I mean, in the support, if we have a problem, you get right to a person. And to compare that to Cisco is, if you're working with Cisco, you got to call them or submit a ticket through email. Talk to this guy, talk to this guy, talk to this guy. It's going to take you, if you're having a major network outage with a Cisco support, even if the best SmartNet contracts, it's still going to take you probably the better part of, I would say, half hour to an hour to get a person on the phone. And they're going to have to verify your company information, your serial numbers, your part numbers, who you are, why you're calling, a whole 9 yards. With Arista, they have this mentality of fix the problem, ask questions later. They will say, okay, you have an Arista product. Let's take a look at it now. They're immediately looking at the product. They're looking at the project. They're looking at the problem. They're diagnosing. They're working with you to understand what the problem is. And then once they have a grasp on the importance of the problem and how bad it is and stuff like that, and then someone they'll actually get the information themselves, because they'll say, okay, let's do a Zoom session. I had one time I worked with them on a problem. Within probably 10 minutes, I had a person on a Zoom session looking at my screen at the command line. They were able to pull all the information they needed. They didn't have to ask me any questions. They were able to get the serial number. They got all the information, everything, and they were able to help me right there on the fly. And the great thing about their support is even better is, if say you get someone and you're working on this type of problem and you get this person on the phone and they don't really 100% know what, they specialize in some other different part of the Arista, they will actually say, oh, wait, let me call someone. And they'll bring another person into the call. Next thing you know, you got 3, 4, 5 Arista support technicians on the phone, all working together on the same problem. One thing we did a few weeks ago, we had a pretty unique case. We were working on a migration, and Arista actually had one of the guys on site with us, 2 Arista guys on site. They wanted to work with us and make sure they understood our network better. So they came on site 1 o'clock in the morning, stayed till about 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning and worked with us. And it was, absolutely amazing. You build that relationship, and it's a lot different than any other vendor we've ever used before. I mean, it's a much personal feeling. You know who you're working with, and they're really knowledgeable staff, and it's absolutely amazing. And before we got the Arista products, we had a lot of questions. Do we go with Juniper? Do we continue to stay with Cisco? Do we go with Arista? We were concerned about a lot of these things. And we were talking with Rob and all his team, and they were able to identify adapters, transceivers, cables, throughput, backplanes, processor, all this technical, tiny details they ask questions about, and they really delve really far into our network, further than anyone else would have. Even the Cisco people, we're using Cisco, and Cisco was just kind of like, they were like, we're Cisco, you're just going to buy us. And I'm like, no, we're not. We're with the best product support and the best product. So we spent a lot of time working with Arista and understanding their operating systems, their support procedures, their support policies, and their support structure. That's another thing that's interesting, is that they have like a lot of their supports based on 3, 4, 5-year support contracts, and it's based across the platform. Whereas Cisco, in our old world, if you bought a Cisco device and you had to worry about paying for support, you were looking at support for each card in that device. If there was a card that did this, you had to have a contract for it. If you had a chassis that did this, you had to have a contract for it. Well, Arista bundles that all together and says, here you go. It's just so much easier to work with. And lastly, one thing is how fast their equipment is to, introduce to your network. We're able to bring devices online in a matter of minutes. You plug it in, you do this, you do that. You can sync configurations. I mean, the Cloud Vision portal allows you to do all these tools, and has the visibility that I've quite frankly never seen with some of the Cisco gear. And it's really, I think, ultimately what Arista's products are going for is, what I like to call a quality of life improvement, for your employees and your customers and everyone involved. It just gives you that visibility. It gives you the tools. It gives you, the fast response times. If there is a problem, it literally tells you ahead of time that, you may be having a problem here, and you may be having a problem here. So it's just, I'm absolutely amazed with it and impressed, and I'm glad we have this amazing relationship with them.
We do have a couple questions if you want to take those quick. The first one is, has this investment had a financial impact on the customers themselves, or did Northland make the investment to better serve their customers?
This is no, and this is all internal to Northland. I don't believe we've had any impact on the customers' costs or prices or anything like that. This is an investment for Northland, our infrastructure, our management, our ease of use, and our transparency to the customer to make us, a better network and a more resilient network for the customer.
And then one more, if you could summarize.
If I could just add to that real quickly, Sarah. Yeah. I think, one thing that's really important, especially in this world of escalating costs and inflation and whatnot, and of course, operational expenses are always rising for everybody. I think what's nice about, your network being carried by Northland is that by making their investment in Arista, it keeps their operational expenses lower. Again, by simplifying that software environment, it allows them to keep their costs steady instead of escalating their costs and then having to, pass that on to you folks. So by keeping their operational expenses low and still being able to ride, Moore's curve with doubling of technology, you can rest assured that you're with a company that's keeping its costs as low as possible while giving you the best performance.
Thanks, Rob. And then if one of you, I'm not sure if you both want to answer this one or not, but if you could summarize the overall customer benefit of the Arista network in one sentence, what would it be?
I would say reliability and resilience, and convergence. I mean, those are words. I don't really have a sentence. It's just, it gives you that reliability in a network, that peace of mind that, one snapshot, what's going on.
I really can't add to that. That's a customer testimonial. So, Mike lives it. If that's what he thinks are the benefits, I think that's pretty accurate. We are an open systems provider. You're not locked in when you're with Arista. You have the highest performance at the lowest cost, with terrific reliability and stability. And I'm glad to hear Mike, testify to that. So thanks.
Did you guys have anything else as far as your slides or your content?
No, let's see. I just let's see what I didn't present. Sort of a little bit about CloudVision, sort of a single tool for managing everything, whether it's data center, campus, wireless, hybrid cloud, routing, tap aggregation. So we do a lot in data monitoring. Basically, one tool for everything. And it provides you with automation, real-time visibility, continuous compliance check. And that's one thing too that, you know, Mike, if he hasn't experienced yet, Northland will experience this over time. We check for any vulnerabilities and bugs automatically with CloudVision. So Mike doesn't have to troll through tomes and tomes and tomes of documentation to find out what, you know, is out there and what his particular equipment and his operating system versions might be susceptible to. CloudVision will just present that to him on a daily basis. And if it's not pertinent to the equipment that he's running for your network, it will not show. It's just not relevant. So that sifts through a lot of the complexity there. So those are industry exclusives. There's no other network provider that gives the tools that we provide.
Yeah, Rob, I'm actually familiar with the compliancy check. It's when you log in, it'll literally give you an inventory of all your switches and routers and equipment and say, hey, you know, the little star, take a look here. It literally checks all the time as soon as you log in, what your software version is and what you may or may not. And then you click on the little thing and it tells you what it affects and what it changes and the impacts of, you know, upgrading. So it, you know, it lets you know ahead of time, you know, if you're going to do this, this is what's going to happen. So, and what it's going to fix, and are you even using those features? So it's an amazing tool. I've never seen anything like that with Cisco. It's, you know, you hear about it 3 days later through an email and, you know, it's a horrible disaster and everyone's rushing to fix the problem. Whereas Arista's, you know, it's very proactive. I love it.
Great, thanks, Mike. You know, we're happy to stay on and take as many questions as you may have, but that's all we had to just kind of give, you know, very quick introduction to Arista and a little bit of experience from Northland. We're very proud to have Northland in the product family with Arista, and I'm excited, you know, for Northland's customers to rest assured that they're with a modern cloud scale networking company with severe reliability and stability and security. So field any questions that you may have. Are we doing live questions, Sarah, or just chat questions?
Yep, so it's either chat or the Q&A box. We'll see if anyone has anything they want to add. Answered those. Well, if no one has anything else to ask, I wanted to thank Rob and Mike for being here and that presentation. It was great information, and I hope everyone feels the same. And if you do think of a question that you have for Mike or Rob that you didn't get a chance to answer, just shoot us an email, connect@northland.net. And that's it. So have a great day, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Sarah. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.